Hello, 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 hello. How is everybody? This is the Sourceseeker Hour. I am your host, Baruti Carl Alexander. Today we're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about joint ventures. We're going to talk about cooperating in business. I am involved in quite a few things that have to do with this. First, I'm buying a house, and it's a lot involved in buying a house. So those of you who are homeowners, of course, know this. And but certainly, it's a very important thing as far as building your equity, holding on to your equity, and generational wealth. Generational wealth, because if your kids coming after you do not have to put that heavy expense down for the house, then they have more money to be able to work with. Let's say, like my parents, they paid their house off. So it's being given to my brother, and he doesn't have to, he has to pay his taxes, but the house is paid for. And so all of that goes into building generational wealth for a family. And that is what I'm working on also. Buying a house. Now, I don't believe I'll be able to live in it for that much of my life. The majority of my life is already passed. However, the rest of my life, I'll be able to live in it, whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 40 years. And then my kids will be able to have an opening to be able to work on their sales and not have to worry about a place to stay so much. That's very important. This is the Sourceseeker Hour. This is episode number 89. Number 89. I think we are going to go to live Facebook. I want to do that. Let the people know that we are still working things out. Yeah. So very important. And being able to build assets. I just went and rented a car for my daughter for her birthday, and it feels very good to be able to do that. It feels very good to be able to do that, and it's important to be able to do things like that for your family. And so this is what's going on. This is the Sourceseeker Hour. We are being joined by Malloy. Yes.
Carl, how are you?
Oh, pretty good. I was already started. I hit, so we're on Facebook, so be aware.
Okay.
All right. So we're on Facebook, be aware. The rest of the people were late also. So I was going here getting started. And I was talking about real estate and the generational wealth and the generational aspects of how you, over a period of years, you can help your family grow and provide them with different advantages, of course.
Correct.
So that is what I was discussing. Of course, I was discussing my own situation. My parents, of course, they bought a home in '68, finished paying for it, I believe, in like 2000, maybe 2000. It was, or maybe 95, because it was a 30-year loan. And when I was a young man, of course, Darryl, your father had Renaissance real estate. When you were a young man, did you understand all of those factors?
I did not. Of course, starting in the business, for me, kind of almost at 8, and being involved in real estate from that early age, didn't understand actually building wealth. My father would kind of make mention of that sometimes. And so came to definitely understand it over the years. And I think that, just over the years then, as becoming a real estate professional and working with individuals, especially single individuals that, let's say single, that are looking to get married, that are looking for a home, that maybe look for a home, considering a mate, I encourage them not to rent, but to go ahead and purchase. And that upon marriage, that property can become rental property, and or you can sell it to help buy the next property.
I do not believe in our community as a whole, we have gotten proper knowledge of how things work. And that's one of the best examples. Now, you had the opportunity, as I say, your father, your mother, they shared with you. In a way, my father shared with me also, but my mind was on different things and so forth. But your family was in the middle of that industry at that particular time. But today, because of what my father and my mother did, of course, our family home is owned by many years and is turned over to my brother. And it's the family home, and it will continue for generations. It can continue for generations. Who knows how solid are some of these? Your home on, let me remember the street, Darryl. What's the street?
Redland.
How solid, how many years do you think that home will last?
Well, those homes, in our neighborhood there, those homes were built fairly well. And so you don't have any foundational issues. You don't have any dirt issues that are making any shifting in the area. So if maintained well, they can last for a good number of years. I mean, they can last probably 30, 60, 90 years almost.
Maybe 100 years.
Maybe 100 years.
Yeah.
Maintenance is the key. In a lot of situations, when properties are passed down from generation to generation, maintenance can become an issue as far as how do we maintain the property, and if there's any deferred maintenance along the way. And so if you have deferred maintenance, then the issue becomes, how do we catch up on the maintenance?
Well, what you're talking about is the individuals involved not taking care of the property.
Right.
So given if everybody takes care of the property and looks out for the foundation of the home and the foundation of generational wealth, along with life insurance, another thing that we really didn't understand growing up, and if my other guest gets a chance, he's a life insurance expert, we can maybe talk about those two things. But see, life insurance, you hear that, and as a young people, you're saying, hey man, what are you saying? You're saying, I need to pay for set up for my death? That's not what it is. I mean, of course, it can benefit your loved ones if something does happen to you. But even more than that, the life insurance that my friend Jeff talked about is the type of life insurance that builds up equity, and you can turn that equity over to your loved ones. And that's another asset as far as generational wealth.
I think in a lot of situations, especially with insurance, that we aren't educated to use insurance as a wealth building tool versus using insurance just to pay for our death. I think, as you may mention from the beginning, a lot of times we think of that as just burial insurance versus paying for death. I mean, I know people that as a part of the inheritance for their children, that they will actually purchase an insurance policy that can be worth and pay cash for it up front. And, by the time they're actually projected to die, it can be worth millions of dollars. And the insurance is actually put into a trust so that when that person dies, there's a trust insurance for each individual child that pays them, and, they can have a lifetime of benefits.
Yes. Now that goes back to.
Go ahead. We're not normally taught that kind of insurance. We're taught whole life, we're taught term life versus actual annuity type insurance.
Would you say, well, our educational system is not necessarily set up to teach you about generational wealth. Our educational system is not necessarily set, even things like a bank account. I wasn't taught that in elementary school. I mean,
I think that's something that
family.
I think it's a family responsibility to share the family finances, to share, to help a person out, help a child out, to set up a bank account, to get a job, to start saving money. The educational system is not set up to share that with you. And so if we sit and depend on the education system to do that, then we're missing the mark as parents and missing the mark as a generation.
I agree to a certain extent. However, we could set up our educational system to benefit us in the way that we need to. Now, we have to understand that the educational system itself, and as a teacher 30 years, I can say this, it was never necessarily set up to, well, let me just break it down. It does have some inherent racist mindset in all of these particular things, because it started. Have you seen the movie The Banker?
Yes.
If I understand the premise of the movie correctly, the brothers set up a bank, but they realized and understood that they would get so much negative feedback as the head of the bank. So they had a pseudo person, white person, set up as the figurehead. Is that correct?
That was correct, based on the movie, yes.
And if we look at our society, all throughout our society, it's always been set up to not, of course, be fair. And I mean, just go back through chattel slavery and everything else. And we've always had to try to overcome that in every kind of way that we can. I wrote an article many years ago about Budweiser. Budweiser started, I believe, off the top of my head, in 1868. We were just coming out of slavery at the time. And I went down the line on how they started and what they were doing over those particular years. And they compared it with the opportunities that Black people had at that time. And we were not able to make a Budweiser because it was not allowed for us to make a Budweiser. If we look at the story of Wall Street, Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma, we've always had that type of risk of happening, that we have built, or we tried to build, or we were seeking to build, and we had to come up against those particular disadvantages. And even in the real estate area, of course, there's a great history there. I've shared a lot. What is your comment on the opportunities of today, given that we've had to rise so far?
I think that, we're living in a time now where the millennials are going to be as big or bigger than the boomers, and their incomes are great, and they're risk takers. The only thing that will possibly stop them is they're major consumers as well. But I think they can be a generation that changes how things are done. They change the wealth that's built in our community, and they can be a difference maker. They can be a change maker.
I agree with you, except for this. You still have a major faction. January 6th showed us that.
Well,
let me finish, please. Let me finish, please. You still have a major faction. So the millennials, yes, but then you have a major faction. What I am saying, we're gonna go much further to the other side, but before we get there, there's gonna be some type of conflict. There's gonna be some type of...
It doesn't have to be.
It does not have to be, but if I look at the January 6th mentality, I am not...
The January 6th mentality will be there forever. That's not going to
Yes,
change.
but it
So
can be
so we sit
higher
and let
or it can be lower.
But if we sit and let the January 6th mentality hold us back, we'll never go anywhere.
I'm not saying don't try. I'm not saying don't try, my brother, Dr. Darrell. I'm not saying don't try. I'm not saying don't put it out there. But if you're not aware that you may have somebody that you encounter that has a January 6th mentality, and if you're not aware that the level of their mentality or their opinion of your possibilities or them coming against you. I'm not saying don't try everything. I'm just saying be aware of that. And I am saying that before the majority of the people get a chance for a greater fairness, there's going to be a reckoning before that time. I believe that the majority of people will get to the higher level. However, before we get to that, there's going to be a reckoning, my opinion, before that time. Now, you and I, we're not going to be a part of that major reckoning, maybe, maybe not. However, we have to be aware. Now, at the same time, if we build our assets and build our circle, if you will, we have a greater chance to have impact in the days to come.
I think that, one thing that, you take a Jay-Z, you take a T.I., you take some of the rappers out there that are talking about buying the block. And so investing in the hood, investing in your neighborhood and buying properties there, that we can gain wealth in our own neighborhoods. The wealth doesn't have to leave our neighborhoods. We can develop businesses in our neighborhood, utilize, buy black per se. And so once again, to me, if we sit and look at January 6th, we got to understand, I understand the reckoning that will come one day, but that reckoning, we can't sit and wait on it. And the reason we can't wait on it is, first of all, we're outnumbered. So, and then you got
that's changing also. That's changing also.
But listen to this. Logically, I was listening to CNN last night and the various things that are going on in the Senate and the House right now. And these guys are making decisions and voting for and against things. And I'm like, okay, so how do you act like this in DC and then go back home to your community and expect to be reelected? But if the community isn't involved in the politics, isn't involved in voting, lets it pass them by, and doesn't hold their representative accountable, then it will be as it always has been. But we have to get involved in politics. We have to get registered to vote. We have to actually go vote. We have to question the various politicians that represent us. And then even start, when you think about race and religion and politics are the three things that we're not supposed to talk about when we're with people that don't look like us. But in actuality, we need to talk about race, religion, and politics with people that don't look like us, meaning that at the lunch table, at work, after work at the happy hour, just wherever you are, fellowshipping, playing business with people that don't look like you, we got to be able to have meaningful exchange of information and dialogue about race, religion, and politics. Because in actuality, we're all losing. The parties are fighting, but the people are losing.
Yes, I have a different approach than that. I say that we talk among ourselves and create a greater circle. Jay-Z get with Rihanna, so forth, so on. You all buy not just a block, you buy a state, you buy a whole community. And the problem we have in a lot of ways is we, for petty things, attack and get on, we fight each other. Because the only way you can change them from basically attacking you, you have a greater sense of power that they don't want to get the feedback when they come at us. So I believe that's the only approach, and we have to create greater circles, which I think we are starting to do in a way. We're starting to create greater circles. LeBron James is starting to combine his money with Steph Curry and different things of that nature. That is the way to go. But at the same time, we still have all of these other nuanced things. For instance.
But see, I think if we try and allow and rely on, let's say, the LeBrons, the Jay-Z's, basically you kind of start at the top. Where in actuality, we need to start at the grassroots, meaning that, 2 or 3 people on one street get together, and if it's a house in the neighborhood that's of disrepair, that's possibly in a foreclosure, then 2 or 3 people in the neighborhood need to get together and buy that house. And versus waiting on a Jay-Z to come buy a house or waiting on a LeBron, it's like we got to put little money together to change our community.
I was just giving that as an example, right. But certainly we have to create little circles that can be a bigger circle. It is changing. It is changing in a lot of ways that more and more people have the assets. They have the money. They have the wherewithal to be able to go at these different ventures, and the high bar of what people believe is capable is starting to evaporate, because we believe and we see much more that we can compete in any area and across the board. So yes, just with the normal process, things will advance, but there's still that reckoning, and that reckoning will always be there. And how do we do that? How do we make sure? Because the reckoning comes in so many different ways. It comes by media. I'm gonna give you an example. In the rap music game, I think it was in the early 2000s, and you might already know this story, that the record executives, the record companies, they coordinated with the prison industry. And they said, we want to send more of them to prison for our bottom line. So the music became gangster rap, kill, drugs, so forth, so on, instead of inspirational rap. So you have all these little messing things going on. Of course, that's always been in the television industry. Now we are getting more people within television to be able to have an impact. For instance, Judas and the Black Messiah 10 years ago, I don't think would have came out. But today is a greater climate. It's a better climate today that allows it. So if those things keep moving forward, it will enhance the community overall 100%. But let me tell you what is also happening. Our young people do not, oftentimes they're so confused, they don't know which way to turn. I don't know how many times I've gone to the Jack in the Box or the Burger King, and I see the young man talking, hey, and they got the earrings on and all that kind of stuff. And it's so much of that going on that they do not know, and it's much more public. And we got so many. And have you seen the amount of young men, young Black men on the street?
Well, I think that.
So what I'm saying is we have a rising culture, but at the same time, we have an attack on our culture at the same time. So we got to do two things at once. We got to help educate and support our people, as well as creating opportunities for economics and so forth. This show right here is a forum and a platform that allows for this discussion. And I know that we are rising, we are growing, we are doing everything else, but I don't want to lose sight that there's a whole lot going on underneath, that if you are not at the top of your game, you can fall. You can fall right. Easy. I have a 22-year-old son. I'm concerned about him all the time, because yes, it's my opportunity. But see, you mentioned that it's the parents' job. But if society has got the parents fighting with each other, they make it so stressful for the parents to work it out. And I would tell you, if you go back to the Moynihan report and other different things, it was by design in a lot of ways. Now, I'm not saying if they hadn't have done that, we wouldn't have, had our battles. But I still say that because of the effect that they have had on us through slavery, through all the Jim Crow things and so forth, so on, it's a greater challenge. That's all I'm saying.
I agree, it's a challenge, but this is one thing that it's always kind of sort of bothered me and rubbed me the wrong way. Meaning that if we know it's a challenge, then why don't we do something about it? Versus, to me, I'm a statistic kind of guy. So it's like, we just got to figure out which side of the statistics we want to be on. Do we want to be on the 50% that fail or the 50% that make it? And we know the statistics. Let's say, for example, home ownership. 41% of African Americans own homes. So do you want to be on the 41% side, or do you want to be on the 59% side? It's like the stats are there. What does it cost me? What do I have to do to be on the 41% side?
If so I may say,
I got to save my money. I got to have good credit. So am I acting like a 41%er or 59%er? So the stats are there.
If I may comment
we have to overcome our own stats that we make.
Okay. Yes, I would like to be on the 41% side. However, I've been on the other side, and I'm wondering, why are they on the other side? One reason is I didn't know a lot of the processes through the education of real estate, the education of how to go about, for instance, credit. Just 2 months ago, my credit was 535. Just 2 months ago. So I said, okay, I've been looking at it, figuring things out. I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna pay this credit card off. Bam, it went up a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna get Experian Boost. Bam, it went up quite a bit. And then I got another credit card with a higher limit. It went all the way up to 643. How many people now, and it's hard to know who to trust, because you got this credit card company, credit repair company saying they'll take care of you. You got this, and I get how many phone calls a day, somebody trying to haggle with me to get me. So that's a big problem. I would tell you, out of that 59%, maybe at least 15% probably could do it. But because of everything, and that's why I come back to building circles.
But you know what? Let's deal with that 15%, because that's a very good point. Because 15% don't want to make a change because they heard it was not a good thing. Because they saw their parents lose a property, lose a home or something. They saw a flood come and they had to move. So through bad experiences, people sometimes make a decision that is safer on this side versus trying to get to the 41%, up to the 40. What's crazy about ownership in Black neighborhoods, or black ownership in real estate and land? In the 1950s, when we had redlining and all kinds of things out there, that it was actually legal for them to say, you can't buy a house over here. We owned more land then and made less money than we do now versus all the money that we make. So
that goes to my point.
We have to change our mindset of being a consumer.
Yes, I agree, but and I'm not saying, hey, blame the white man. That ain't gonna do you no good. But understand what has happened so that you can correct it. Understand. Make sure you're up to date on all the information of what has happened so you can be aware, and maybe you can help that 15%. But see, we are afraid because we don't know who to trust either. See, you are building a very credible voice. Everybody doesn't have a credible voice that they can trust. See, I've been knowing you, how long we've known each other? 50 years?
Probably 50 years.
I know your, in my opinion, I know your soul. So, I mean, everybody, I think we just gotta help people be more comfortable.
Right.
That is the key. Because I tell you, I get 10 calls a day, people trying to haggle with me. Oh, you need this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you know. So yeah, people are scared. I mean, they don't have a $2,000 to waste and it goes away. They don't have that. So I understand. And it took me a while to where I could get very comfortable and understanding what's going on. And so I think the best thing that we can do in our small circle is keep doing programs like this. We are on Facebook also. We're on Zoom also, and sharing with people. From this, maybe somebody will say, hey, that brother, he knows about real estate. I want to contact him. Hey, I want to hear how you took your credit from 535 to 643 in like a month and a half. So we got to get our voices out there a little bit more. I mentioned about the investment. Is real estate really the best investment? What about all this Bitcoin? What about cryptocurrency and all this stuff going on? Is real estate still the best? You know, I know a little bit about it. I'm asking the question.
I hate to say that I don't know much at all about Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all those things. But I know from watching the big boys, meaning watching those that
Warren Buffett in them.
The Warren Buffetts, and you know, just everyone that's in the top 10, the top 50 around the world, richest people, most of their assets are based in real estate. And let's say you take even an Amazon, and we can say, you know, the business, but you know, Amazon now is building warehouses, and they're warehousing product. They're warehousing trucks. They're warehousing planes. You know, the Warren Buffett has become one of the biggest single-family homeowners in the country. Now, who knows if Warren Buffett's out buying single-family houses? But that's what he's been doing for the past couple of years. So these guys are actually in the real estate. Bill Gates is like one of the largest farmland owners in the country. I mean, it's like, you know, we sit and think that they're making all, I mean, I was amazed. I saw Bill Gates on 60 Minutes talking about how he really hasn't done Microsoft work in 20 years. For the past 20 years, he's been studying farming. He's been studying, you know, all the different diseases in the world. But it's like, he talks about reading 1,000 pages a day. He has all these people that come in and speak to him and tell him what's going on across the world. I mean, he's so rich, he can just have a question, and tomorrow he can have the experts at the table explain it to him. And a lot of it is real estate based. And so, you know, we can sit and not want to own it, not want to participate, but it's, you know, they're not building anymore. Even an Oprah Winfrey has talked about real estate ownership. And so, you know,
I agree. I do agree that as far as I can tell, real estate has always been and probably always will be the best investment. But I will say about Bitcoin, I mean, it's a very, because it's not regulated and you don't know what's going to happen with it. Somebody who's still anonymous came up with an ideal that every part of the computer has value. That's how they came up with it. Right. And they created an industry and people jumped on board. Now, a lot of people, I mean, there's people getting paid their salary of Bitcoin, but, you know, I've been asked to be a spokesman for it and so forth. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to put people in something and we don't know where it's going to go. Now,
Well,
I
tell you what's
personally, we
interesting,
got.
Carl, listen to this. You know, we had the hackers that hacked the pipeline last week before last. Those guys got paid in Bitcoin, $5 million in Bitcoin. And it's like, wow, you know, that's like an eye opener, like this is real. But it's almost like, as you're stating, kind of the Bitcoin thing is kind of a rolling of the dice on the dark side.
It is a roll of the dice, but now it's so big that I think they're going to have to find a way to normalize it.
Well, I talked with a client about 3 weeks ago, and he does a whole bunch of things. And he said he had got in Bitcoin and the various coins years ago when it first came out. And the first time Bitcoin dipped, he got out, but he left his money in. So he was talking to one of his clients, and they talked about how Bitcoin and Dogecoin was doing so well. And so he said he spent so much time trying to figure out what was his password so he could go back to his accounts and open them up. And he saw that he had made some money. He said, Darrly, I took that money I'd made, and now, so it's been sitting there. He said, now I wanted to reinvest it. He said, Darrly, I never lost money so fast. He said, as soon as I invested it, it went to zero. He said, I never had an investment that goes to zero. It's like, you know, it might go down, but he said, my accounts were just wiped out like overnight.
Well, I'm gonna tell you from experience. I just looked at mine yesterday.
The volatility is crazy.
I just looked at mine yesterday. I'm down to 270. First of all, I put in 300. Now, a month ago, it was almost $500. Now it's down to 270. So it's very volatile up and down. So I'm still not convinced that it's going to turn out to be a great investment. However, I do believe one day it's going to be normalized. We're toward the end of, go ahead.
What this guy made mention of. He said the one thing about Bitcoin is that there is not a source of guarantee. So let's say with money, kind of gold is your guarantee. But with Bitcoin, it doesn't really have a guarantee. There's no one backing it. You know, it's not an FDIC backing it. So it's kind of an unknown norm or an unknown bottom. Because this is my thought. Probably every day, I get 3 to 5 Facebook requests, friend requests from people that are selling Bitcoin or some kind of coins. So to me, it's one of those where, okay, if I accept you as my friend, and now you're going to want to sell me on the idea of investing in Bitcoin, then are we really selling Bitcoin or are we selling dreams? And the way you make your money is on the dreams or the smoke that you sell me. And you make your money. I had a guy call me the other day. He said, Darrly, you can invest $300. He said, and once you invest your first $300, we pay you $300 every day. I was like, man, I invest $300 and then I get paid $300 every day. It's like, so what do I have to do for that? Now, of course, I haven't finished watching the video because I don't understand. But it's dreams involved, and it's like, is it real? And sure, the people at the top, the people that have been, it's almost to me multi-level marketing. And not that there's anything wrong with multi-level marketing, but it's pyramid more than multi-level marketing. And so the people at the top are making long dollars, but it's almost like this. But
let me interject this about Bitcoin, if I may. If you invest your money in Bitcoin, let's say it can get taxed when you try to cash it back out.
Okay.
Yeah. So you invest in it And as long as you leave it in there, it can grow, it can grow, it can grow. But when you try to recash it back out, there's a cost involved. And anybody that's jumping in, they have to look at that. Now, the long players are probably just leaving theirs in and trying to wait on the market to normalize and the government to say, okay, you only got to give up this amount or this amount or this amount. But that's the whole point. You don't know yet. You don't know exactly. So I do not want to promote. I've had so many people want me to be the salesman for it. I'm not going to do that because I'm not confident in telling somebody else that they should do this. So I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to still look at it and pay attention. And I got some money myself in it. I want to go into this, Brother Darryl, before we, because we're almost at the end of our show. We got about maybe 10 more minutes. Joint ventures. I've been reading about them. Now, joint ventures, basically we have joint ventures all the time, if I'm understanding. We could do a joint venture. If you hire a lawyer, you have a company, isn't that a joint venture to a certain extent?
It depends.
A joint venture is for a limited time that you agree to do business together.
But to me, an attorney hired to work for you is not necessarily a joint venture unless there's shared equity, unless there's shared profits.
Okay, that's the key.
If I'm just an employee,
okay,
just a part of your wealth team helping protect your assets as an attorney, even as a realtor, that doesn't make it a joint venture. Now, a joint venture is two people or more that have a similar idea, a similar goal, that want to achieve something and have decided to pool their monies together and make that happen. Now, it could be where you have a general partner that's actually active partner, active in the business, and then you become a silent partner, just bringing money to the table. And so there can be a joint venture made up that way. You can have a nonprofit and a for-profit organization do a venture together. You could have, for example, for a nonprofit to come to the table and gain ownership with a for-profit organization. A nonprofit could like roll in their assets as equity into the project and become a partial owner of the project. Now, from a legal standpoint, you have to make sure that you're still doing the same mission, that the mission hadn't changed. And you have to be careful in how the for-profit makes money from or with the nonprofit, so that no one's taxing incorrectly or being taxed incorrectly or taking advantage of tax-wise.
For instance, like let's say if my company, which is the Brighter Source Group, wanted to do a joint venture with Memorial Hermann.
Okay.
And we talked to them, we want to do a 5K run where we have an entry fee, we have different things involved, but we share expenses, and they are donating basically their sponsorship. Would that be a joint venture?
That
would be a sponsorship, huh?
It's interesting to talk about the medical center.
Say again?
I say it's interesting to talk about the medical center. To me, I did research on the medical center years ago, and the medical center was started by 5 businessmen, not doctors, 5 businessmen that thought that Houston needed hospitals and needed a hospital district. They had one of the guys that died early on before the medical center even started building. They were acquiring all this land, but this guy died like in the 30s or the 40s, just a long time. I don't recall the date now, but he had a $35 million life insurance policy that was donated to the medical center. as a part of being in the partnership. He had insurance for the partnership. And that set the medical center on their way. Now, what's interesting is when you take if you really look at the ownership of the hospitals, a lot of them do have a nonprofit that's actually owning the hospital per se, or partnering, a joint venture with the hospital. And then you have for-profits that are actually kind of running everything and managing for them. And so then you have this balance of, it depends on, let's say if you're trying to get support, do you go to the nonprofit side or do you go to the profit side? The nonprofit side has money set aside for hospital care, free hospital care for certain people. They have money set aside for events. But the for-profit side is where they're actually making money, but it's a venture. And from the outside looking in, you almost think of it as a nonprofit, but the hospitals are making all kinds of money.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities when you have your legal nonprofit set up. And as you said one time about building credibility in one area.
Right.
Yeah, which is very, very important. For my group, we're working on the area of mental health. Also, the area of the Sourceseeker Hour. See, this was started before we ever started the nonprofit, the Sourceseeker Hour. So I have loaned this project, the Sourceseeker Hour, to our group for the purpose of us building, but I still own it. And there are other activities that I do working with them, but I'm still an individual, still got that part of my company. So I understand that, and it's part of what we are seeking to do. It's a process, so forth. And when you were mentioning about joint venture, I was really looking at that in a lot of different ways. So yes, I understand. Is there anything else that we can share with our audience before we get ready to close up? Let me first say this is the Sourceseeker Hour. This is our 89th episode. And as you all know in the audience, we have many different type of programs. Today, we're talking about joint ventures, but we have also been talking about just business in general and what is the best investment and how can we build generational wealth, which is a concept that we need more of in the Black community, building generational wealth. Now, I must say that we didn't have the opportunity many years, but as you say, things are changing. However, there's still a reckoning that we have to deal with, but it's a whole new world. And it's not a world that is gonna limit you just based upon your skin color. However, you still have to deal with that nuance that there are certain people that have a stereotype based upon how you look. I know about that. I go through a stereotype so many times that I've had people to tell me, I know who you are better than yourself. And of course, I just laugh at that and so forth, because nobody ever gets it right. So many people think that, they can look at you and say, okay, you're good at doing this, you're good at doing that. And that's not the case. For instance, I've been 30 years as a teacher, but that's not, if I'm not getting paid, I don't want to do that. If I'm not getting paid and getting paid well, I don't want to do that. I'd rather do public speaking, and from this forum, like I am now, I'd like that to grow and do more things in that area rather than doing that. But somebody who don't know me and see me working with kids and so forth, which I'm very good at, I'm an expert at, the state says I'm an expert at, that's not what I would like to do though. So can you share, of course, your background, tell us about Renaissance Realty and other things that you do. And if people would like to reach you and reach out and say they want to buy a home or just get some expertise, if you could share some of those things.
All right. I'm Darrly Malloy. I've known Carl for 50 years. So that makes me a little bit older than 50. I've spent most of my life in real estate. I have a degree in accounting with a minor in construction management. I was telling someone the other day, Carl, that I do a bunch of different things, and almost everything I do involves teaching. And so
Involves what?
Teaching.
Okay.
So I will teach a person how to buy a house. I will hold their hand and walk them through the process of buying a house. I walk them through the process of selling a house, and have a heart for people, and do many different things along that line, real estate being my main focus, and mentoring young people, whether it's mentoring them to become a homeowner or mentoring them to find a job, just a big heart for the next generation. Because I think the communication between the boomers and the millennials is major. And it's not just major in our community, it's major, period. I think that we have to understand that in a lot of situations, doesn't matter the race, there's a gap right now between the generations. And we're not talking, we're not listening, and there will be major repercussions because of it. So I think, your forum, utilizing.
I think that generational gap has always been in our society. You go back and look at the history, the beginning of rock and roll and all of that. That's always been us as older people. We somewhat don't like change. I'm not talking about me personally, but older people get set in their ways, and hey, I was successful at this, and I like things to remain the same. I gave an example on one of my shows. I talked about the church and how it has changed, and specifically the church that I was in. They do not want to change and update with the times. See, because as we know, it's a different. When we were growing up, Darryl, we didn't have the internet.
Right.
I mean, I thought I was being big when I got a pager.
Right.
And so look how much it has changed. And if you don't go along, and still today, there's a lot of things that I got to go get my 17-year-old daughter to do. I can't. Now, over time, I'll figure it out after she teaches me. But I mean, and as you're saying, these new.
Listen to this. If we can figure out, once again, an exchange of information where your daughter teaches you the internet and you teach her about credit, you teach her about banking, you teach her about getting a job and going to college and getting a career. So there has to be an exchange. It's like we need to listen to the young people as much as we need to talk to the young people.
Very much so. Very much so. And I'm all number, about that. I got 3 of them to listen to.
I understand.
Yeah, so,
I tell you this, Carl,
but at the same time, they have to learn something from us. One thing I saw with my dad, the Honorable Raymond Alexander, my dad got up and went to work every day. He came home and put food on the table for me. But when I was a young man, I don't know if this is similar in your family, I did not understand the depth and I did not understand the largeness of my dad. I did not I'm sitting up there laughing and saying, oh, my dad, he don't know this, he don't know what he's doing. But my dad was on a whole nother level. And now I understand that. Now, I started to understand that maybe 20 years ago. But and it all goes back to our family situation and our building respect in our community, our understanding of pulling from the knowledge from our grandparents, our parents, our community. When I came up in Hillwood, hey, your mother would say, hey, don't you do that. My mama didn't have to come around the corner. Your mama would have said it. Now, my mama came around the corner with a belt and she chased me home. But today, our kids have lost a little bit of that respect. However, it's a different thing today. We got to adjust to a
let me share
different
this,
thing.
Paul.
Yes, sir.
2020, I learned so much from my daughters. All the politics and everything that was going on, we had different views, we had different ways of looking at things, and I learned in listening to them, fighting with them, going back and forth, just sharing my point, them sharing their point, but I learned to respect women so much more because I started seeing and understanding how, let's say, Kamala Harris, how people were treated based on being female, based on being Black and female. And it's like, sure, we all sit around and talk about the struggle of the Black male, but in actuality, they've used us against each other. And they have as much of a struggle as we do, if not more. And to think of it as your daughter going through that struggle or your grandchild going through that struggle, it opens up your eyes to a different way of thinking. And to be respectful, I think, as you're speaking of, we were respectful. I was respectful of my father. In my eye, he could do no wrong. But at the same time, did he have the same kind of respect for me? Do we have the same kind of respect for our children that we expect them to have for us? So that respect, once again, has to be a balancing act, and where we understand where young people are and where they're going, and we try and figure out how can they help you get to the next step. And
yes, brother.
By both listening and talking.
That is a whole subject, a whole show on its own. We've been talking about business. Of course, when you're talking about business, you're talking about an aspect of life. All those factors are going to come in. You mentioned a very important thing, Black women fighting with Black men. And, to a certain extent, that was set up. But today is a new day. And the new millennials, we can create circles and we can grow. This is the Sourceseeker Hour. I'm your host, Baruti Carl Alexander. I got my brother with me, Darrly Malloy, 50 years of power, peace and power. And we've just been sitting back and sharing and talking about business and talking about life. We're at the end of our show and we're gonna hold it down today, but come back another time. But we're gonna continue talking about these things because they're very important. They're very important. And if anybody wants to come in and share and give us a comment, we'll get back to you. Darrly will get back to you. I'll get back to you. This is the Sourceseeker Hour. I'm your host, Baruti Carl Alexander, with my brother, Darrly Malloy. I would like to say thank you all, and we're going to see you next week. Thank you. Have a good day. Darrly.